A design refresh and a supposed return to fundamentals makes up what might be a surprisingly great device in the Galaxy S line. It's Joshua Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And this is the Samsung Galaxy S6. The latest in the Galaxy S line has quite a few issues to address, and it all starts in design. Okay, let's get it out of the way before we move on. Yes, there are some obvious design influences here, but there is just enough in the Galaxy S6 to reassure the user that it is still a Samsung device through and through. Samsung learned from the Galaxy Note 4 and the Alpha phones after it that a metal construction is definitely the way to go, though the dual glass panels still feel quite like the departure from what we expected to be a pretty plastic device in previous iterations. The metal rim has a subtle taper to its edges, influenced by the frame of the Galaxy Note 4, and the various colors of this phone benefit from a translucence that gives the colors a bit more character than just being plainly on the device. Samsung's iconic button layout returns as well, bringing the tactile home button up front, flanked by the recent apps and back capacitive keys. And the fingerprint scanner on the power button is now a press version rather than the swipe editions from before. The charging port and the headphone jack are on the bottom together now, with the speaker grill that has been brought away from the back this time. Move around to the back, and you'll notice that there is nothing to remove. All you really get is a camera optic package that protrudes out quite a bit, which might not be great for people who slide their phones on tables, for example. But no, there is definitely no removable backing, as this unibody design also makes it expandable storage and replaceable batteries no longer an option. What is most striking about the phone's design is noticed once you get it into your hand. The 5.1-inch display keeps the phone from being too big, but a very noticeable thinness and lightness greatly helps as well. What results is one of the most comfortable feeling experiences in a Galaxy S flagship since perhaps the S3 or the S4. The metallic frame is of course a very welcome change that shows how Samsung is looking to improve their design. For many users, this might be the first great-looking Samsung device since their older Pebble design was first introduced in the S3. And I'm inclined to agree, as the design choices in the S6 are not only striking, but ergonomically sound in a way that has come as a bit of a surprise. The 5.1-inch screen on the Galaxy S6 is a very powerful one. At this size, we are now getting a Quad HD Super AMOLED display that rocks 577 pixels per inch. All that pixel density is sure to make media consumption quite great, backed by the highly colorful AMOLED display that we've come to expect from Samsung. Handling the screen is still the highlight here, as the minimalistic body of the S6 helps alleviate hand gymnastics on the already pretty accessible 5.1-inch panel. Thus far, we're happy with what we see in the Galaxy S6 display, but the benefits of the Quad HD resolution on a display that is less than even 6 inches is still up for debate, of course. In hardware, I already mentioned that there is no removable backing and thus no access to the battery or expandable storage. These are choices that are going to be hotly debated in this new flagship, and though the unibody design makes these choices unavoidable, we feel the lack of these two features will be sorely missed. And the 2550 mAh battery, despite benefiting from fast charging capabilities, might be a little small for people's tastes. And in performance, we start with a bit of precedence by Samsung. Globally now, the Galaxy S6 will now only sport their in-house made Exynos processors. Samsung has proved their prowess before in the processor department, but enhancements to the 64-bit processing package hope to bring the S6 into the next generation, and thus far, we definitely feel the power at work. In a time when scrutiny in user interface experience is at its all-time highest, paying acute attention to the updated TouchWiz is something we could not help doing. And in this somewhat dialed-back Lollipop version of TouchWiz, we're quite surprised at how well it was able to get through its elements despite all of the features that may have returned or were added to the experience. TouchWiz is still feature-packed, but what struck me about my short time with the Galaxy S6 is that I actually don't really remember either accidentally triggering certain features like multi-window or getting annoyed by the sheer amount of elements trying to get me to notice them. A dialed-back TouchWiz, though it is still a bit too colorful like before, actually seems to be what we're getting here. Transitions in and out of applications, messing with the recent app screen, and especially the ability to bring up the camera in fractions of a second with just a double tap of the home button all show just how fast this version of TouchWiz is. And it's yet another little surprise in our time with the Galaxy S6. Speaking of the camera, we can now get to it, and its enhancements will really be put to task once we get our hands on a review unit, but the spec sheet is pretty compelling. A 16-megapixel rear-facing camera is now backed by a 5-megapixel front-facing camera, and both benefit from a quite low f1.9 aperture for good low-light performance. Auto Live HDR is also found on both cameras, so getting compelling pictures from the Smart OIS-powered rear camera or the occasional self-portrait from the front should yield some high-quality shots. We don't have any picture examples to show you just yet, but we will definitely be looking at picture quality when we have a chance to. That said, the interface is pretty simple to get around this time, with the mode selector easily showing you different ways you can use the optics. My personal favorite, and what I will be using quite often, is the full manual mode that includes manual focus, a much better alternative to the selective focus mode in my opinion. But a bit like the TouchWiz interface in general this time around, the camera interface shows buttons for what is essential for easy access, and then gets out of the way until the user activates the extras. And that's a step in the right direction. And so, there you have it, the first look at the Samsung Galaxy S6. We came to Samsung not knowing quite what to expect and left honestly a bit surprised at what we held and experienced. And you know what? That's a pretty good thing. It seems Samsung is making the main steps in the right direction in design, performance, and in the camera, but it remains a bummer that crucial parts of the hardware experience had to be sacrificed in order to make those enhancements happen. We won't know if the full experience is all it's cracked up to be until we get our hands on a full review unit. And the surprising part is that we can't wait to get to do that in the coming weeks. Keep it tuned to Android Authority for all of the best coverage here as we report to you live from the Mobile World Congress 2015 in Barcelona, Spain.
Hey, what is up guys, I'm KBHD here, and this is your first look at the Samsung Galaxy S6. Now Samsung has announced two new phones today, so the Galaxy S6 and the Galaxy S6 Edge, and I have videos about both up right now, so definitely be sure to check out that Edge video as well. It'll be the first link below that like button. But this Galaxy S6 is definitely the more traditional looking of the two new phones, so this is the totally reimagined Samsung flagship, supposedly rebuilt from the ground up in its design, but if you ask me, it has a lot of elements that remind me of devices I've used in the past. But yeah, so the leaks were right. You can see it looks like another Samsung phone from the front, and then it has chamfered metal sides to grip, real metal this time, not plastic that's painted to look like metal. And the button placement is all on point. It kind of feels like a mini Note 4 in the hand, except for the back, which switches over to this very shimmery, very glossy, very slippery glass back. It's Gorilla Glass 4 on the back. And you don't actually have to hold that glass though, since the glass curves on the edges right to the metal, so your hand is basically just holding the metal all the time, so at least it has that going for it. It is slightly thinner than the Galaxy S5, it's just 6.8 millimeters thin, and it's also a bit narrower from left to right thanks to the super thin bezels on the sides, kind of like the LG G3, so that is one thing I really like. It's a 5.1 inch display, but it manages to fit into a pretty compact, usable sized body, even with the home button and the chin and everything. And speaking of that display, it is gorgeous. So it's a 5.1 inch Quad HD AMOLED display that gives it a pixel density of 577 pixels per inch. It basically looks like a piece of paper when looking at sharp text or images or video or anything really. It's really impressive to look at. Plus it gets super bright, up to 600 candelas per meter squared. That's extremely bright for an OLED display, or any smartphone display really. And yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. The colors are super saturated. It will likely be the best display on any smartphone when this phone is released. So that's Samsung at its best right there. Only thing that remains to be seen is how long the battery will last. So obviously the Galaxy S5 had a 1080p display, so I'll have to see how long this Galaxy S6 with its 2,550 mAh battery can last when you put through its paces in real-world use. I'll definitely be testing that a lot in the review. Now, another thing Samsung has always done really well is the camera, and the Galaxy S6 is no exception to that rule. It's rocking a new 16 megapixel sensor, but with all new optics, so an f1.9 maximum aperture, which is super fast, and I'm glad that that's improving. And so that combined with optical image stabilization should make some awesome images and video, and should be even better in low light too. There's also a shortcut to it just by double tapping the home button from anywhere, so it's kind of like that Motorola double twist, and it's actually pretty fast, so if some action unfolds in front of you, you don't have to think twice or anything, just double tap the home button and you can take a photo in probably a matter of under a second. It's also capable of 4K video again, and yes, I know the camera protrudes a little bit on the back, and people have been talking about that a lot, but at least it's right in the middle, so it doesn't really affect a lot. It doesn't affect typing when sitting on a table. I tried that, so it's not really as much of a big deal as some people have made it out to be. Also, you get a very wide-angle front-facing camera too, which also has an f1.9 aperture, plus some neat selfie tricks, so you can use your finger to tap the IR sensor on the back of the phone to take a photo, since it's sort of a natural place for your finger to rest. So it reminded me overall, this phone, a little bit of the Nexus 4 with that glossy glass back, which by the way is a serious fingerprint magnet. And it also reminded me a little bit of the iPhone 6, of course, with the bottom of the phone, the rounded metal, the speaker grills, and also with the improved fingerprint reader in a good way because it's a lot faster and finally only requires a touch instead of a swipe to unlock and get into things. It's definitely on top of the spec game though, with an octa-core 64-bit chip, 3 gigabytes of RAM. It's not IP67 certified anymore, so no water resistance, and no expandable storage or removable back, but it added Qi wireless charging support and an infrared blaster on the top, and fast charging for 50% charge in 30 minutes with the supported charger. Now, Samsung promised me something when they told me about this phone. They told me they cut down on the excess software by 40%. And I don't know how you measure that, but we all know by now that TouchWiz is infamous by how heavy it is, how slow it can make phones feel, and also how ugly it is. Now, unfortunately, it's still not pretty. It's running on top of Android 5.0 Lollipop, so there are, little flatter elements here and there. You have some material design once in a while, but you still have a swipe over to Samsung's My Magazine. You still have all of Samsung's ugly stock icons and Samsung's wallpapers, and still have some preloaded apps, like a few Microsoft ones, and Samsung's Milk Music. So it's not totally gone, but at least it feels fast. I was actually genuinely impressed just scrolling around through homepages and opening and closing apps and flying through multitasking at how smooth and quick the software glided through everything. Animations didn't stutter, there wasn't really any lag either, so I can't say that about any other Quad HD phone, even my Nexus. So this is definitely the smoothest Quad HD phone out there, which is promising. I still would have liked to see more cut out of TouchWiz, or at least some redesign of the icons or something like that, but overall the software experience is definitely an improvement. So overall, it's looking like the initial gut reaction a lot of people have to this phone is the design, and that makes sense. People want to see a big visual change on the outside, and I gotta say, this is not the prettiest phone Samsung has ever made, but I can tell you, it's two different things to look at the phone versus actually holding this phone in your hand. It's actually one of the best feeling phones Samsung has made in a while, thanks to the new materials and the tighter bezels, and of course that gorgeous display doesn't hurt either. So there you have it. It's the most tame version of Samsung's two new flagships announced today. Definitely let me know what you guys want to see in the full review when that goes live. Thank you for watching this first impressions, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.